with emotion that even he, a man who prided himself on control, couldn't explain. The next morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual. He went to the living room and sat before the piano. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, falling on the black and white keys. He reached out and pressed one. It rang softly, ordinary. He pressed another, then another. He tried to mimic the melody Lily had played the night before. But it sounded hollow, lifeless. He stopped, letting his hand rest on the keys, and for the first time he admitted quietly to himself, "I don't understand this." When Lily came downstairs, she found him sitting there still and quiet. He looked at her, unsure of what to say. She hesitated by the doorway, her small fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve. "Do you want me to play again?" she asked softly. He blinked, surprised, then shook his head. "No," he said. "You should eat first." It was the gentlest tone she had ever heard from him. Over the next few days, something began to shift. Daniel stopped correcting her every move. He still asked her to practice, but he no longer stood over her shoulder counting mistakes. Sometimes he'd even step outside or listen from another room, unsure why, but trusting her more than before. Yet deep inside, he was still curious. How far could she really go? Was what he saw that night a lucky moment or something greater? One evening, Daniel returned from work carrying a small box. He placed it on the piano. "What's this?" Lily asked. He smiled faintly. "A recording mic," he said. "I want to hear you play properly, like in a real performance." Lily's heart raced. "You mean, record me?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, but not for fun. I want to see how much you've improved." The old strictness was still there in his words, but underneath it, there was something new, a hint of pride that night. Lily set up the small microphone while Daniel watched, his arms crossed, pretending not to care too much. She sat at the piano, her mother watching quietly from the kitchen. This time she chose her own song, not Moonlight Sonata, but something she had composed herself. Daniel frowned slightly. "That's not from your book," he said. "I know," she replied. "I made it." His eyebrows rose. But he didn't stop her. Then she began to play. The melody was soft and haunting, like a memory turned into sound. It started gentle, then grew stronger, rising like a wave. Daniel's expression shifted as he listened. There was structure, harmony, feeling all woven together naturally. She wasn't copying anyone. She was creating. When the last note faded, Daniel sat frozen, the small red light on the recorder blinking, capturing everything. He didn't speak for a long time. Lily waited nervously. "Was it bad?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "It was different." He didn't know how else to describe it. He couldn't find the words for the pride swelling inside him. That night, after everyone went to bed, Daniel replayed the recording alone. Over and over he sat in the dark, headphones on, and realized something profound. His daughter wasn't just talented. She was gifted beyond anything he could have imagined. But with pride came confusion. He had spent his life believing hard work was everything. Now he was seeing something that didn't fit into that belief, something born of emotion, not discipline. It unsettled him, yet amazed him. He thought back to all those nights he'd scolded her, all the times she'd played quietly while he wasn't looking, and guilt began to creep in. Meanwhile, Lily had found new courage. She played every evening now, not out of fear, but joy. Sometimes she'd experiment, blending classical melodies with her own imagination. Even her mother started humming along while cooking. The house that once echoed with tension now filled with warmth and life. The piano, once a symbol of pressure, had become their family's heartbeat. A week later, Daniel came home holding an envelope. "There's a music competition in town next month," he said, handing her the flyer. "A children's showcase. They're accepting recordings." Lily's eyes widened. "You mean, you want me to enter?" she asked. He nodded, trying to sound casual. "Why not? Let's see what those lessons were worth." But his voice betrayed a hint of pride and excitement. They spent the next few days preparing. Daniel helped her polish her recordings, learning how to upload and format them properly. It was awkward for him, a man of order and rules suddenly exploring a world of creativity and art. But he was determined, not because he wanted to win, but because for once he wanted to understand her world. The night before the submission deadline, they sat together listening to the final version. The melody was the same one she had composed, but richer now, deeper. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He didn't say it aloud, but he thought, "She's already better than I could ever dream to be." After submitting the recording, Lily thanked him quietly. "For helping me," she said. He smiled awkwardly. "Just doing my job as your father." But his eyes were soft, and for the first time, she saw admiration there, not pressure. Later that night, Daniel sat alone by the piano again, running his hand along the keys, remembering how it all began. The rules, the anger, the misunderstandings, and how somewhere in between, love had learned to speak through music. He realized that while he had forced her to play, it was she who had taught him to listen. Outside, the rain began again, gentle and steady, just like that first day, and as the drops tapped softly against the window, Daniel smiled faintly because this time, when he heard the piano, it no longer sounded like defiance or duty. It sounded like freedom, the kind his daughter had earned note by note, in silence, in secret, and in pure, unstoppable brilliance. The morning sun spilled through the curtains, painting the piano keys in gold. The house was unusually quiet. Daniel sat at the table reading the paper, but his mind wasn't on the words. Ever since Lily's music recording had been sent to the competition, something inside him had changed. His once rigid world now had rhythm. It had melody, it had warmth, but beneath his new calm, a nervous energy brewed. He was waiting for the results even though he hadn't admitted it to anyone. Not even to himself. Lily, on the other hand, seemed lighter, more at peace. She no longer looked afraid of the piano. Now she played for the joy of it, not because her father told her to. Every morning before school, she'd sit and play short tunes, cheerful, bright pieces that made the house feel alive. Her mother, Anna, would hum along as she packed lunches, smiling at the sound that used to be a source of tension. Daniel often stood by the doorway, pretending to check his watch but really just listening, letting the music fill the spaces between them. A week passed, then two, and no word came from the competition. Daniel grew restless. He checked his email more than once a day, though he told Anna it doesn't matter if she wins, it was just practice. But she could see the excitement in his eyes. Lily never asked about it, she just kept playing, sometimes teaching herself songs she found online, other times creating her own. She didn't need a result to tell her she loved what she did. Then one quiet Thursday afternoon, while Daniel was at work, Anna's phone buzzed with a new message. She opened it. It was from the music competition committee. Her eyes widened. She read the words twice to make sure. Then a smile spread across her face. "Lily," she shouted, rushing into the living room. "You've been selected." Lily turned from the piano, confused. "Selected?" "Yes, sweetheart, for the regional performance round. They loved your recording," Anna said, her voice trembling with pride. When Daniel came home that evening, Lily ran to him, clutching the printed email in her hands. "Dad, they picked me. I'm going to perform live next month," she said breathlessly. He froze in the doorway, his work bag still hanging from his shoulder. He took the paper, read it carefully, then looked at her, his face unreadable. "They liked your music?" he asked slowly. She nodded, eyes shining. "They said my composition was original and emotional," Daniel exhaled, a sound halfway between disbelief and awe. "Original," he murmured. "That means you wrote it," she nodded again. "Yes, the one you recorded," for a long moment. He said nothing, then quietly he smiled. Not a small, polite smile, but a real one. Rare, warm, and full of pride. "I knew you could do it," he said softly. Lily's face lit up. "You did?" He nodded. "I just didn't expect it this soon." Anna stood behind them, her eyes wet, watching the two finally standing on the same side. The following weeks were filled with preparation. Lily practiced every evening, not because Daniel told her to, but because she wanted to make him proud. Daniel began helping her again, but differently this time. Instead of commanding, he encouraged. Instead of criticizing, he asked questions. "What do you want the audience to feel here?" he'd say, or, "Why did you change this note?" And Lily would explain. Their evenings became conversations instead of confrontations. Sometimes Anna would find them both sitting on the piano bench together, Daniel holding the sheet music while Lily played, her father nodding along, occasionally smiling when she hit a particularly beautiful chord. The atmosphere that was once cold and heavy had turned warm and alive. One evening, as they finished a session, Lily asked, "Dad, do you ever wish you learned to play?" Daniel looked at the piano thoughtfully. "Maybe," he said. "But I don't think I could ever play like you," she giggled. "You could if you tried," he chuckled. You sound like me now. She laughed and nudged him lightly. Except I mean it nicely. He shook his head, pretending to check his watch but really just listening, letting the music fill the spaces between them. A week passed, then 2, and no word came from the competition. Daniel grew restless. He checked his email more than once a day, though he told Anna, it doesn't matter if she wins. It was just practice, but she could see the excitement in his eyes. Lily never asked about it, she just kept playing, sometimes teaching herself songs she found online, other times creating her own. She didn't need a result to tell her she loved what she did. Then, one quiet Thursday afternoon while Daniel was at work, Anna's phone buzzed with a new message. She opened it. It was from the music competition committee. Her eyes widened. She read the words twice to make sure. Then a smile spread across her face. Lily, she shouted, rushing into the living room. You've been selected. Lily turned from the piano, confused. Selected? Yes, sweetheart, not for the regional performance round. They loved your recording, Anna said, her voice trembling with pride. When Daniel came home that evening, Lily ran to him, clutching the printed email in her hands. Dad, they picked me. I'm going to perform live next month, she said breathlessly. He froze in the doorway, his work bag still hanging from his shoulder. He took the paper, read it carefully, then looked at her, his face unreadable. They liked your music? He asked slowly. She nodded, eyes shining. They said my composition was original and emotional, Daniel exhaled, a sound halfway between disbelief and awe. Original, he murmured. That means you wrote it. She nodded again. Yes, the one you recorded. For a long moment. He said nothing, then quietly he smiled. Not a small, polite smile, but a real one, rare, warm, and full of pride. I knew you could do it, he said softly. Lily's face lit up. You did? He nodded. I just didn't expect it this soon. Anna stood behind them, her eyes wet, watching the two finally standing on the same side. The following weeks were filled with preparation. Lily practiced every evening, not because Daniel told her to, but because she wanted to make him proud. Daniel began helping her again, but differently this time. Instead of commanding, he encouraged. Instead of criticizing, he asked questions. What do you want the audience to feel here? He'd say, or why did you change this note? And Lily would explain. Their evenings became conversations instead of confrontations. Sometimes Anna would find them both sitting on the piano bench together, Daniel holding the sheet music while Lily played, her father nodding along, occasionally smiling when she hit a particularly beautiful chord. The atmosphere that was once cold and heavy had turned warm and alive. One evening, as they finished a session, Lily asked, Dad, do you ever wish you learned to play? Daniel looked at the piano thoughtfully. Maybe, he said. But I don't think I could ever play like you, she giggled. You could if you tried, he chuckled. You sound like me now. She laughed and nudged him lightly. Except I mean it nicely, he shook his head, pretending to be offended, but his eyes sparkled with pride. As the performance day drew closer, excitement mixed with nerves, Daniel ironed his best shirt, Anna packed tissues, and Lily rehearsed her piece until every note felt like second nature. The night before the event, Daniel sat by her bed as she tuned her small electric keyboard one last time. You nervous? He asked. She nodded. A little. Good, he said. That means you care. She smiled. Will you sit in the front row? Of course, he replied. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The next morning, the concert hall buzzed with voices. Children from different schools were practicing backstage, their parents whispering encouragements. Lily sat quietly with her hands in her lap. Daniel adjusted her hair clip, something he hadn't done since she was little. You look ready, he said softly. Remember, play it your way. Not the way anyone expects, she nodded. Took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. When she sat at the grand piano, the lights dimmed and the audience hushed. Daniel and Anna held hands in the front row. The same girl who once trembled under her father's strict eyes now sat tall and confident before hundreds. Her small fingers touched the keys, and then silence broke into sound. The first notes flowed like a story only she could tell. Every emotion she'd ever hidden came through. Her fear, her determination, her quiet triumph. The melody filled the hall, wrapping everyone in its spell. People stopped whispering, they simply listened. Daniel felt his heart ache with pride and regret. He remembered every harsh word he'd ever said, and how she had turned it all into something beautiful. When the final note faded, there was a pause, then an eruption of applause. People stood, cheering. Lily looked out into the crowd and saw her father standing too, his eyes bright, his hands clapping louder than anyone else's. She smiled through tears, her heart full. After the performance, when she came running into his arms, Daniel lifted her up and whispered, "You didn't just play the piano today, Lillian. You played my heart too." She laughed and said, "Told you I could do it." He nodded, smiling. "Yes, you did?" And for the first time in years, he didn't think about perfection. He thought about pride. That night back home, Lily placed her small trophy on top of the piano, the gold surface reflecting the light. Daniel looked at it for a long time. Then at her. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think I was teaching you discipline." She tilted her head, curious, but he smiled. "Turns out, you were the one teaching me how to listen." She grinned. And for the first time, the piano didn't look like a test or a burden. It looked like home, filled with love, music, and the sound of a family finally in harmony. The weeks after Lily's performance felt like a dream that refused to fade. The applause still echoed in her mind. The lights of the concert hall, the way her father stood up clapping. It all replayed every night when she closed her eyes. Her small trophy stood proudly on top of the piano, catching the morning sun each day. A reminder that something had changed forever, not just in her life, but in their home. Daniel was different now. He still woke up early, ironed his shirts, and read the paper. But the edges of his discipline had softened. When he passed by the piano, he no longer looked at it as an object of order, but as a living thing that connected him to his daughter. Sometimes he would pause and run his fingers along the keys, pressing one or two notes like a man testing a memory. And though he never admitted it, he had started to love the sound. Lily, on the other hand, was glowing with quiet confidence. She no longer hid her talent. Her teachers began asking her to play at school assemblies, and her classmates would gather around her, listening in awe. Her music wasn't perfect, but it was full of something real. "Heart," her mother often said. "You were born for this." And Lily would laugh shyly. "Maybe I was just born to feel a little louder than others." One evening, as Daniel returned from work, he found Lily sitting at the piano, headphones on, lost in her world. He waited until she finished before asking, "What are you listening to?" She smiled. "A new piece I'm learning, but not classical." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Not classical?" She nodded eagerly. "It's modern piano. It mixes melodies and stories. It's beautiful," she said, her eyes shining. He chuckled. "So, you're leaving Beethoven behind now?" "No," she said quickly. "I'm just finding my own sound." Her words stayed with him that night. Finding my own sound, he repeated them to himself quietly, realizing how much she had grown. She wasn't just his daughter anymore, and she was an artist, a creator. And all he could do now was stand back and watch her soar. Still, a part of him worried. The world could be harsh, and he wondered if her soft heart would survive it. The next week, a letter arrived in the mail. It had a gold seal and fine paper. Daniel opened it at the table while Lily practiced in the next room. His eyes widened as he read. It was from a National Music Foundation. They had seen Lily's competition video online, and they wanted to invite her for an audition in the city. Only 10 children across the country had been chosen, and she was one of them. Daniel sat back in shock, the paper trembling slightly in his hand when he told her. Lily froze, her fingers hovering over the keys. "An audition?" she repeated, her eyes wide. "In the city?" He nodded, smiling. "Yes, it's a big one. National level. They said your piece was exceptional," she gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh my gosh," she whispered. Anna hugged her tightly, laughing and crying all at once. Daniel stood there quietly, his chest heavy with pride. The following days were filled with preparation again. But this time, Daniel didn't treat it like training. He treated it like support. He sat beside her, not behind her, sometimes holding a metronome, sometimes simply listening. When she made a mistake, he didn't scold her. He smiled and said, "Again, but this time feel it, not fix it." Lily grinned every time he said that. It was his way of showing he'd learned something too. On the day of the trip, the family packed their small car and drove to the city. Tall buildings stretched into the clouds, and Lily pressed her face against the window, whispering, "It's so big." Daniel smiled. "Big dreams need big places," he said. And she laughed softly when they reached the music hall. She clutched her father's hand tightly. the nervousness showing for the first time. "What if they don't like me?" she asked, her voice small. He crouched down to her level and said gently, "Then you play for yourself, not them. Remember what you told me. Find your own sound." Inside, the hall was filled with young pianists, some older, some taller, all confident. Lily felt tiny in comparison, but when it was her turn, she took a deep breath and walked to the stage. Daniel and Anna sat in the back, watching her climb onto the bench. The judges whispered among themselves as she arranged her sheet, then silence. Her fingers touched the keys, and once again the world seemed to disappear. The song she played wasn't from any composer. It was her own, a new piece she had finished 2 nights ago. It started softly, full of curiosity, then grew into something bold, bright, and alive. The melody carried hints of Moonlight Sonata, little fragments of the music her father once made her play, but twisted into something freer, more human. It was as if she was telling her own story through every note. The pain, the pressure, the discovery, the love. When she finished, the hall stayed quiet for a long moment. Then one of the judges, an older woman with silver hair, stood and said softly, "That piece wasn't on your list." Lily froze. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I just wanted to play something I made." The woman smiled gently. "No, don't apologize," she said. "It was beautiful." The others nodded in agreement. One of them even whispered, "She's not just talented, she's special." When Lily came off the stage, Daniel was waiting, his eyes glistening. "You did it again," he whispered, pulling her into his arms. "You made them listen." She hugged him tightly. "I didn't play what they asked," she said worriedly. He shook his head. "Good. Because you played who you are." That night as they drove home, the city lights twinkled through the car windows. Lily leaned her head against the seat and whispered, "Do you think Grandma would be proud?" Daniel smiled softly, keeping his eyes on the road. "She'd be playing beside you," he said. "And probably scolding me for making you wait this long." They both laughed quietly, the kind of laughter that heals. In the reflection of the window, Lily saw the faint outline of her father's face, calm and proud, and behind it, the blurred glow of streetlights. Like stars, guiding them forward, she smiled to herself, knowing that this wasn't just her journey anymore. It was theirs. 2 souls once divided by discipline and silence, now united by the music they both learned to hear, not with their ears but with their hearts. The days that followed the national audition felt unreal for Daniel and his family. They had returned home with hearts full and minds racing, not knowing what the judges would decide but certain that something extraordinary had already happened. Lily had stood on that grand stage, and in that moment, she wasn't just a child playing notes, she was a storyteller, a dreamer who turned silence into emotion, and her father had finally seen her, truly seen her. A week later, an email arrived. Anna opened it first, her hands trembling as she read, "Congratulations. Lily Daniels has been chosen for the National Youth Performance Gala." She gasped. Dropping the phone onto the couch, Lily's eyes widened. "I got in?" she whispered, her voice small but full of disbelief. "You did," Anna said, pulling her into a tight hug. "You really did." Daniel, who had just walked in from work, stopped mid-step. "What happened?" he asked, and when Anna showed him the message, his expression froze for a heartbeat before breaking into a rare, full smile. He took a deep breath, his voice shaking. "My daughter," he whispered. "A national pianist," Lily laughed through her tears. "It's just a performance." "Dad," he shook his head. "No, sweetheart. It's not just anything." From that day, life became a whirlwind. There were forms to sign, schedules to plan, and interviews to prepare for. The gala wasn't just another concert. It was a televised event with an audience of thousands. Young talents from around the world would be performing, the kind of opportunity that could open doors to scholarships and mentorships. Daniel didn't waste a moment. He took extra shifts at work to cover travel expenses. Though he never mentioned it to Lily, he wanted her to believe this was easy. Effortless, normal. Lily practiced more than ever. But it wasn't out of pressure anymore. It was out of joy. She spent hours fine-tuning her new piece, one she called Echoes of Home. It was inspired by everything she'd lived. The sound of rain, her father's voice, her mother's laughter, and the quiet nights when she played under the moonlight. Daniel often sat nearby, reading but listening quietly, sometimes tapping his foot to her rhythm, sometimes lost in thought, remembering how far they'd come. One night, as Lily practiced, she noticed her father scribbling something in a notebook. "What are you doing?" she asked curiously. He looked up and smiled awkwardly. Just writing down your timings so you don't overplay the bridge. She squinted playfully. You sure you're not just writing poetry about my talent? He laughed, shaking his head. Don't push your luck. But she could see the pride in his eyes. The day of the gala arrived faster than anyone expected. They traveled by train to the capital, the city lights reflecting on the windows as the world outside blurred by. Lily wore her favorite white dress, simple but elegant, her hair tied back with a ribbon her grandmother once made. Daniel sat beside her, holding her hand quietly. Are you nervous? He asked. She nodded. A little. Good, he said, smiling faintly. It means you still care. At the venue, everything felt larger than life. The stage was enormous, the lights blinding, and the audience stretched into darkness. Lily peeked from behind the curtains. Her heart racing, Daniel stood beside her, adjusting her ribbon one last time. Remember, he said softly, you're not performing for judges or cameras. You're performing for that little girl who played when no one was watching. She smiled, tears forming in her eyes. I remember, she whispered. When her name was announced, she walked onto the stage. The audience clapped politely, unaware of the story behind the small girl sitting before the grand piano. Daniel and Anna held their breath. Lily placed her fingers on the keys and closed her eyes. The hall fell silent, and then music. Her piece began with the sound of simplicity. Soft, fragile notes like a heartbeat, then slowly, the rhythm deepened. Every rise and fall told a story of struggle, of love, of forgiveness, and of freedom. Daniel sat still, unable to blink, because in that melody, he heard everything, his mistakes, her patience, their shared transformation. The final note hung in the air, trembling before fading into silence. For a moment, the world seemed to stop, and then the applause began, soft at first, then louder, until the entire hall stood, clapping, cheering, shouting her name. Daniel felt something break inside him. The last piece of the man who once believed love had to sound like discipline. He stood too, clapping until his palms hurt, his eyes shining with pride after the show. Reporters crowded the performers. One of them approached Lily. That was breathtaking, the woman said. Who taught you to play with such emotion? Lily hesitated for a moment, then turned to look at her father standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, watching her quietly. My dad, she said, smiling. He taught me to be strong. But the piano taught me how to feel. Daniel looked down, his throat tightening. He didn't need the cameras or the applause. That single sentence was worth everything. When they got home that night, the house felt smaller, quieter but full of peace. Daniel sat by the piano, running his fingers along the edge. You've outgrown me, he said softly. Lily shook her head. No. I grew because of you, she replied. He smiled faintly. Then promise me something. What? She asked. Never stop playing even when life gets loud. She nodded. Only if you promise to keep listening, he laughed. Deal. That night, after everyone went to bed, Daniel stayed up, listening to the faint hum of the piano as Lily practiced one last time before sleep. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her with quiet awe, her back straight, her hands graceful, her face calm. He thought of the first day she sat trembling at this same piano, afraid to miss a note, and how now she played without fear. He smiled to himself, whispering, You did it, kiddo. The melody floated through the house, wrapping around every corner, soft and eternal. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was a bond, a reminder that sometimes love is learned not through words, but through the spaces between them, through the silence that turns into music, and the music that turns into understanding. And in that harmony, a father and daughter finally found their peace. The morning after the gala felt like waking up inside a dream. The sunlight spilled gently through the curtains, and the house carried a different kind of silence. Not the heavy, fearful quiet that once filled their days, but the soft, glowing calm that follows victory. Lily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her body still tired but her heart wide awake. Her performance had already gone viral overnight, videos spreading across social media, messages pouring in from people she'd never met, praising her music for its honesty, its heart, its soul. Downstairs, Daniel sat at the table, a cup of tea in his hands. He wasn't reading the paper this time. He was watching the video on his phone, over and over, his daughter sitting under the bright stage lights, her small hands commanding silence and awe, every note cutting through the noise of the world. He didn't realize tears were forming in his eyes until Anna placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're proud," she said softly. He blinked and cleared his throat. "I'm impressed," he muttered, but his voice cracked just enough to give him away. She smiled knowingly. "You're proud," she repeated. Lily came down soon after, still in her pajamas, her hair messy. "Morning," she said sleepily. Daniel looked up, pretending not to be emotional. "Morning." "Superstar," he said casually. She blushed. "Dad," she mumbled, sitting beside him. "Everyone's been sending messages. Even my school." Anna placed a plate of pancakes in front of her. "You deserve it," she said. "Your song touched people." Lily chewed slowly, thinking. "It's strange," she said softly. "When I was little, I used to think no one would ever listen to me." Daniel froze, the words cutting deep. She smiled faintly, looking at him. "But you listened," she added. "Eventually," he chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Took me long enough," he said. "Guess I was a slow learner." She giggled. "You weren't slow, just strict," he grinned. "I'll take that as progress." That afternoon, the phone rang again. It was the event organizer from the gala. They wanted Lily to perform at a charity concert next month, this time as a featured guest, not just a participant. Daniel couldn't hide his shock. "A featured guest?" he repeated. The woman on the other end laughed. "Yes, she captured a lot of hearts last night," she said. "We'd love to have her back." When he told Lily, her jaw dropped. "Me? Again?" He nodded. "You," he said proudly. "Looks like the world's finally catching up to you." As the weeks passed, their small home transformed. People from music schools, journalists, and foundations began reaching out, asking to meet the young girl who played from the soul. But Daniel made sure to protect her peace. "She's still a kid," he'd say firmly. "Let her stay one." He handled the calls, filtered the interviews, but every time he spoke about her, his tone softened, a mix of pride and humility. One evening, Lily found him in the living room, staring at the piano. "You still can't stay away from it, huh?" she teased. He smiled. "It's quieter when you're not playing. But it feels emptier too," he said. "Funny. I used to think this thing was just furniture." She sat beside him. "You made me play it," she reminded him. "And now it's the reason we talk this much," he laughed. "Guess I did one thing right." She placed her hand on the piano and said, "You know, I've been thinking. That's dangerous," he joked. She rolled her eyes. "No, really, I want to teach." "Teach?" he repeated, surprised. "You're 13. "I know," she said. "But there are kids at school who want to learn, and their parents can't afford lessons. Maybe I can help them. Maybe music can help them the way it helped me." Daniel stared at her for a long moment, then smiled softly. "You're your grandmother's granddaughter," he said, his voice gentle. "She always said music was meant to be shared, not owned." From that week onward, Lily started teaching 3 neighborhood children every Sunday morning. Daniel would sometimes peek through the doorway, watching her patience, her laughter, her kindness. She never raised her voice, never demanded perfection, and he realized something profound. She had taken everything he once did wrong and turned it into everything he hoped to be. Months passed and the charity concert arrived. This time the hall was even bigger and the crowd larger, but Lily walked onto that stage with calm grace. Daniel sat in the front row, clutching a small pendant her grandmother once wore. He'd brought it for luck. When she began to play, the music filled the space like sunlight breaking through clouds. There was no fear, no pressure, only freedom. Every note was a thank you, every melody a memory as she played. Daniel's mind drifted back to the beginning. The first time she sat at that piano. Her trembling fingers, his stern voice. The mistakes, the arguments, the silence, and then the transformation. The courage, the connection. He felt tears slide down his cheeks, not of guilt anymore, but of gratitude. When the final note rang out and the applause thundered again, he stood up just as before, this time not out of pride, but reverence. Lily bowed, her eyes finding him immediately in the crowd. He mouthed the words softly. "I'm proud of you." She smiled and whispered back, "I know." That night after the show, as they walked home beneath the city lights, Lily looked up and said, "Dad?" "Hmm? Do you ever miss the old days?" she asked. He laughed quietly. "The ones where I scared you into practicing?" She giggled. "Yeah." Those, he thought for a moment, then said, "No. Because the old days brought us here." She nodded. her hand slipping into his when they reached home. The piano sat waiting in the soft glow of the lamp. Daniel ran his hand across it one last time before turning off the light. "You know," he said, smiling, "this piano taught me something too." "What's that?" Lily asked. He turned to her, his voice warm. "That sometimes love isn't loud, it's quiet. It sounds like a single note." Waiting to be heard, she hugged him tightly, resting her head against his chest. "Then I'll keep playing," she whispered. "So you'll always hear me?" He closed his eyes, holding her close. "I always will," he said. And as the night settled outside, the house glowed with gentle peace, the piano standing silently between them, no longer a symbol of control, but of connection, not of rules, but of love. The story of a father who forced his daughter to play, and in return learned what it truly meant to listen.